He partied through life until a stranger walked into his mansion, claiming to be his new stepmother. His rage turns to curiosity, then something he never expected. Because love doesn't ask for permission, it just happens. The Arthur Empire was known across the United States as a symbol of white-glove luxury, precision, and generational brilliance. But at 62, Richard Arthur, the man who built it from scratch, stood in his penthouse office overlooking Manhattan and felt nothing but fear. Fear that his empire, his life's sweat, struggle, and victories would die with him. Fear that his only son, Charles, would never be ready. Fear that the Arthur legacy would become nothing more than a sad headline. Billionaire empire collapses after Playboy heir squanders fortune. Richard rubbed his chest slowly, not because something was wrong, but because something inside him was sinking. The death of his wife a decade ago had carved a hole in him that never filled. But at least he'd still had Charles. Until he lost him too. Not through death, no, but through indulgence, recklessness, and an unstoppable descent into Miami's nightlife. A world of neon lights, loud clubs, party yachts, and women who never stayed past sunrise. Charles was only 27, yet his name circled the media like perfume in a crowded room. Intoxicating, expensive, and heartbreaking. Arthur heir parties till 9 a.m. again. Charles Arthur spotted at Miami Beach with new mystery model. Billionaire's son shows zero interest in family business. Each headline clipped a piece of Richard's heart. He exhaled slowly and pressed the buzzer on his intercom. "Paula," he said to his secretary, "please confirm my doctor's appointment for tomorrow." "It's confirmed, Mr. Arthur," she replied. 11:30 a.m. He nodded, although she couldn't see it. "Good. Clear the rest of my day." Richard's health wasn't the problem, not yet. But the appointment was an excuse to still himself, breathe, think. Maybe the doctors knew how to quiet a panicking heart better than he did. He turned to the framed photo on his desk. His wife's smile glowed back at him. She had been a black woman with a voice soft as honey and a heart as fierce as the sun. She had given Richard the best years of his life, and the son he was slowly losing. He touched the glass. "Maria," he whispered, "I need help." And somewhere in the chambers of fate, help was waiting. The next day, the Manhattan General Hospital smelled of antiseptic, lemon polish, and quiet hope. Nurses glided through the white halls like angels with sneakers. Doctors scribbled hurried notes, and machines beeped in steady rhythm. Richard waited in the private lounge, scrolling through emails until a gentle voice pulled him back into the world. "Mr. Arthur?" He looked up and froze. Standing before him was a woman who seemed to brighten the sterile room just by existing. She wore navy scrubs, her ID badge clipped neatly to her front pocket, her curls pulled back in a puff that framed her warm brown face. Her eyes, soft, deep, curious, were the type that didn't just see you, they understood you. "I'm Nina Roberts," she said with a small smile. "I'll be attending to you today." Something in her presence soothed him instantly. Richard nodded. "Thank you, Ms. Roberts. Please call me Nina." She led him down the hall, noting his stride, his breathing, the slight shake in his left hand. She wasn't just doing her job, she was observing him, caring without saying a word. They reached the examination room, and she checked his vitals with gentle efficiency. "You're doing well," she said reassuringly. "Your heart rate is steady." "Good to know," he murmured. She stepped away to update his chart, and that was when her phone buzzed. She hesitated, then answered softly. "Hello. Yes, I'm on my break soon." "What do you mean they locked him out of class?" "But we paid part of it already." "No, I can't get the rest yet. I'm working overtime already." Her voice cracked. Richard's eyebrows knit together. "Please just tell the principal I'll sort it out somehow," she whispered. "He's in his final year. He can't afford to miss classes." She ended the call, unaware that Richard had heard every word. She turned back with a smile, professional but strained. "I'm sorry about that." "No need to apologize," Richard said gently. "Family troubles?" She hesitated, then nodded. "My little brother. His tuition is short. I'm trying my best to cover everything, but—" She didn't finish. Richard studied her, young, beautiful, hard-working, grounded. Everything Charles lacked. Something began forming in his mind. Something insane. Something brilliant. Something desperate. "Ms. Roberts," he said slowly, "may I speak with you privately for a moment?" They moved to a small consultation room. The silence settled thickly between them. "Tell me about your brother," Richard began. Nina blinked, surprised. "He's 19, studying engineering. He's smart. Really smart. But tuition is expensive, and since our mom passed last year, I've been doing everything alone." Her eyes softened with sorrow she rarely let others see. Richard leaned back. "You're a responsible young woman, Nina." "Rare. Thank you. I try." He inhaled deeply. "I have a situation. A personal one. And I think you can help me." Nina stiffened slightly. "Help? In what way?" "Nothing inappropriate," Richard assured quickly. "This is a business proposition." She relaxed, barely. Richard continued, choosing every word like stepping stones on thin ice. "My son, Charles, he is wasting his life. Women, clubs, alcohol. Everything but responsibility. If I die tomorrow, the Arthur Empire will die with me." Nina's brows arched sympathetically, but she did not interrupt. "I've tried everything," he said. "Therapists. Business mentors. Taking away his privileges. Nothing works." He sighed. "He needs something emotional. Something personal. Something that disrupts his world." Nina frowned. "I'm not sure I follow." Richard met her eyes. "I want you to enter a contract with me." "A contract?" she repeated slowly. "Yes. For 6 months." He swallowed. "I want you to pretend to be my wife." Nina jolted. "You're what?" "My wife," he said calmly. "Publicly. Privately. In my home. In front of Charles." Nina stared at him like he had suddenly spoken in another language. "Mr. Arthur, that's insane." "It is," he agreed softly. "But desperate times call for desperate actions." She shook her head. "I can't pretend to be your wife." "Hear me out," he interrupted gently. "Charles won't stand any woman near me. If he sees me with someone new, someone young, beautiful, and grounded, he will react. He will be forced to confront his lifestyle. Forced to change." Nina exhaled shakily. "Even if that made sense, which it doesn't, why me?" "Because you're good," he said simply. "I saw how you handled me. How you spoke on the phone. You're everything my son is not, and everything he needs to see." Nina shook her head again. "I don't lie. I don't manipulate people." Richard nodded. "And that is exactly why I want you. You're honest. You're pure. But you're also drowning financially. Let me help you while you help me." She went silent. Richard leaned forward. "I will pay your brother's full tuition. I will pay off your student loans. And I will give you enough to be financially stable for the next 5 years." Her breath caught. "That's life-changing money," she whispered. "I know." She closed her eyes, torn between morality and survival. "Nina," he added softly, "my wife died 10 years ago. I loved her. I will never love another woman. I'm not asking for romance. I'm asking for an illusion. A temporary one." A long silence fell. Nina paced slowly, her mind racing. 6 months. Pretending to be a billionaire's wife. Living in his mansion. Facing the wrath of the Playboy Prince of Miami. But her brother needed her. Her future needed her. And somehow, this man's sincerity reached into her heart. She stopped pacing. When she looked at Richard, her eyes were steady. "I need conditions." Richard nodded immediately. "Name them." "First, I remain myself. I don't lie beyond what's necessary for this arrangement." "Agreed." "Second, no physical expectations." "None." "Agreed." "Third, if at any point your son becomes dangerous or abusive, the contract ends that second." "Absolutely." "And fourth," she swallowed, "my identity must be protected. I can't have the media tearing me apart. You have my guarantee." Nina inhaled deeply and extended her hand. "I'll do it." Richard's relief was so intense he nearly collapsed into his seat. "Thank you, Nina. You may have just saved my son and my legacy." 3 days later, Nina stood before the Arthur Mansion in Miami. The mansion wasn't a house. It was a kingdom. White pillars, arched windows, fountains dancing in the driveway. The garden stretched into infinity, manicured like it belonged to royalty. Her cheap suitcase felt embarrassingly small in her hand. A chauffeur opened her door. "Welcome, Mrs. Arthur." Nina cringed internally. Mrs. Arthur. It still sounded absurd. Inside, Richard greeted her warmly and introduced her to the household staff, who had been thoroughly briefed, and generously compensated to play along. But the peace lasted only 30 minutes. Because that's when Charles arrived. The heavy doors swung open, and in walked a man whose energy filled the room like fire. Charles Arthur. Tall, effortlessly handsome, sharp jawline, tattoos running beneath the collar of his designer shirt. His blonde hair was messy from the Miami wind, and his blue eyes were glazed with annoyance the moment he saw Nina. "Dad," he said slowly. "Who is this?" Richard smiled as though he were introducing a business associate. "Charles, this is Nina. My wife." Charles froze. Then he laughed. "No," he exploded with laughter. "You're joking," he said, looking between them. "Dad, seriously. This woman, she's what? My stepmother?" Nina's stomach twisted. Richard stepped forward. "Yes, Charles. She is." Charles's laughter died. "Oh, you're actually serious." "I am." Charles took a slow, mocking look at Nina, head to toe, his lips curling. "This is a gold digger," he said coldly. "You can't be that stupid, Dad." Nina flinched, but Richard stepped between them. "Enough." "Oh, I'm just getting started," Charles sneered. "How much did she ask for?" He turned to Nina. "You look innocent, sweetheart, but trust me, I can spot a scam from a mile away." Nina met his eyes without flinching. "I didn't ask for a penny." Charles scoffed. "Right." Richard's phone buzzed. He checked it, then pocketed it calmly. "I have to leave tonight. A business trip." Charles's eyes widened. "Tonight? What about?" "You two will be fine," Richard said firmly. "Nina will be staying here. Treat her with respect." Then he turned and walked away. Just like that. The door closed behind him. Silence stretched. Charles turned slowly toward Nina. His eyes were ice. "You have no idea what you've just walked into," he whispered. "And I promise you." He stepped closer, invading her space. "I will make sure you don't last a week in this house." Nina swallowed hard, but didn't break eye contact. "We'll see," she said softly. Charles smirked darkly. The war had begun. The first morning in the Arthur mansion felt like walking into enemy territory. The sun rose beautifully over Miami, painting gold across the marble floors, but the atmosphere was thick with hostility. Nina woke at 6 a.m. sharp, habit drilled into her from years of nursing. She showered, dressed in clean, simple clothing, tied her curls neatly, and stepped out into a house that felt far too large for one person. Except it wasn't just one person. Charles was waiting. He sat on the kitchen counter, literally on it, shirtless, muscular arms crossed, an empty champagne bottle beside him. He looked like he hadn't slept at all. His eyes tracked her movements instantly. "Morning, stepmom," he drawled. Nina didn't reply. Instead, she walked to the sink, filled a glass with water, and took a slow sip. Charles slid off the counter and sauntered toward her, his confidence dripping like arrogance. "What's wrong? Keck out your tongue? Or are you still adjusting to being Mrs. Arthur?" "Nina is fine," she said calmly. "Oh, I'm sure it is." He smirked. "So, let's get something clear." He stepped closer, too close. "You don't belong here." Nina set the glass down. "I'm aware this is your home. I'll stay out of your way." "You're not listening." His jaw tightened. "I will make you leave." Nina's voice stayed steady. "I won't fight you, Charles. Believe whatever you like. Just don't expect me to play games." Charles blinked, thrown off. He was used to anger, fear, pleading, not calm, not a woman who didn't flinch when he stepped forward. Nina turned to leave the kitchen. "House rule," Charles said behind her. "No boring people allowed." "Then you'll have plenty of space," she replied and walked away. For the first time in a very long time, Charles felt speechless. By noon, Nina realized Charles meant every word of his midnight threat. He started with noise. Music thundered through the mansion, club beats shaking the floors. The sound system was so powerful the walls vibrated. Nina read her book anyway. He smirked and increased the volume. She turned a page. Charles narrowed his eyes. He expected her to scream, complain, break. Instead, she simply moved to the far lounge, sat on a sofa, and continued reading while classical music played softly through her headphones. His jaw dropped. "What?" she asked calmly when she caught him staring. "You're weird." "Thank you," she said simply. Charles stormed off, irritated. The next day, Charles escalated. By evening, luxury cars rolled into the driveway, neon, loud, flashy. Half a dozen party girls strutted inside wearing glitter and perfume. Champagne flowed like water. Ice buckets clinked. Laughter echoed. The mansion transformed into a nightclub. Nina stayed in her room, door closed, reading a medical journal. But around 1 a.m., she stepped out. Not because she wanted to, but because someone was crying in the hallway. A young woman, clearly drunk, sat on the floor with mascara streaks running down her cheeks. "My friends left me," she sobbed. "I don't know where Charles is. I don't know how to get home." Nina knelt beside her. "What's your name?" "Lauren." "Okay, Lauren. Let's get you water." She helped Lauren to the kitchen, gave her water, sat with her until she stopped shaking. When the girl could walk, Nina guided her outside and ordered her an Uber with her own money. Before the car arrived, Lauren hugged her. "You're nice," she whispered. "Charles isn't." "I'll take that as a compliment," Nina said gently. When Nina turned around, Charles was standing in the doorway, watching, expression unreadable. "Why did you help her?" he asked. "Because she needed help." "That's not your job." "It's who I am." "You didn't have to pay for her ride." "I know." He stared at her like she was an equation that didn't add up. Nina walked past him. For the first time in 2 years, Charles canceled the rest of the party and went to bed early. The next morning at breakfast, Charles didn't blast music. He didn't insult her. He didn't swagger around with arrogance. He walked in quietly, wearing a simple t-shirt, hair messy from sleep. "Morning," Nina said without looking up. He hesitated. "Morning." Silence followed. Not hostile, awkward. After a minute, Charles cleared his throat. "So, you're a nurse?" "Yes." "How long?" 3 years. "And before that?" "Medical school." He leaned on the counter. "Why nursing? Why not doctor?" Nina raised an eyebrow. "You sound surprised." "I'm not surprised. I just didn't expect," he gestured vaguely. "Someone like you." "Someone hardworking?" she teased. An embarrassed shade crossed his face. "I didn't mean it that way." "Yes, you did," she said lightly. To her shock, Charles actually smiled. Not the cocky, mocking smile he wore like armor, but a real boyish one. It softened him instantly. Nina looked away. Before either could speak, Charles winced and gripped his hand. He had a deep cut, barely wrapped with a cheap bandage. "What happened?" Nina asked sharply. "Nothing," he muttered. "Just a stupid bottle." "Let me see." "No." "Charles." Something in her tone, firm, caring, professional, made him obey despite himself. He extended his hand. Nina removed the bandage. The cut was deeper than she expected. Red, swollen, angry. "You need stitches." "I'm fine." "You're not." She met his eyes. "I can take care of it." He froze. Nobody had spoken to him like that in years. She cleaned the wound, disinfected it, wrapped it with expert precision. Her hands gentle but efficient. Charles watched her quietly. "You're good at this," he murmured. "It's my job." "No, I mean you care." Nina didn't answer. She simply secured the bandage and stepped back. "All done," she said. Charles studied her face, searching for something he couldn't yet name. And for the first time since Nina arrived, Charles said softly, "Thank you." Something shifted after that moment. Charles didn't transform overnight. He was still a man who lived fast, but a new awareness grew in him. An awareness of her. A curiosity. He started noticing things. How she woke at 6 a.m. without complaint. How she spoke to the staff gently, with respect. How she called her brother every night, checking on his homework. How she cooked simple meals because she didn't want the chef working late. How she preferred books to TV. How she prayed quietly before bed. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't chasing his father's money. She was real, and it unnerved him. He found himself watching her from doorways, across hallways, from the corner of his eye, unable to stop. One afternoon, he caught her sitting on the balcony, wind blowing through her curls, reading in complete peace. "Why do you read so much?" he asked. She didn't look up. "Knowledge heals." "That sounds like a fortune cookie." "That doesn't make it less true." He smirked. "You're strange. And you're loud." He laughed, an honest laugh that surprised them both. 5 days into living together, a thunderstorm struck Miami. Power flickered. Wind roared. Rain slammed against the glass like thrown stones. The mansion went dark. Nina sighed. Generator failure? Probably, Charles said. They lit candles in the living room. The flames flickered warmly, casting golden shapes across the walls. For once, the house felt human. Nina sat cross-legged on the sofa. Charles sat on the opposite end, unusually quiet. After a moment, he spoke. "Can I ask you something?" "You just did." He smirked. "Why nursing?" "Really?" She set her candle on the table. "My mother fought cancer for 4 years. Nurses were the ones who stayed with her when doctors couldn't. They held her hand. They prayed with her. They told her jokes. They made her feel human." Her voice softened. "I wanted to be that for someone else." Charles's face grew still. "What about your father?" she asked softly. He swallowed. "Hard. Car accident. I was 12. He died instantly. My mom, she held me until the ambulance came." Nina's eyes softened. "I'm sorry." He nodded, staring into the candle flame. "You know, people think I'm reckless because I don't care. But it's the opposite." His voice dropped. "I feel too much. And I don't know what to do with it." Nina didn't speak. She simply listened. And Charles felt something crack open inside him. Something long buried. Something fragile. After the storm, nothing went back to how it was. And Charles didn't want it to. He woke early. Ate healthy food. Stopped inviting random girls. Stopped drinking until sunrise. He started following Nina around with excuses. "Need help with that? What are you cooking? What are you reading now? Want company?" Every day, she chipped away at his walls without even trying. Every night, he replayed their conversations in his head. He shouldn't fall for her. She was his father's wife on paper. She was calm and disciplined, everything he wasn't. She was good, everything he feared he could never be. But he couldn't help it. He was falling. Hard. One afternoon, while searching his father's study for a missing document, Charles opened the bottom drawer. And froze. A thick envelope sat inside. Labeled. Contract Agreement. Richard Arthur and Nina Roberts. His chest tightened. Hands trembling, he opened it. Paragraph after paragraph. Legal terms, signatures, financial agreements, conditions. His stomach dropped. His father had paid her. Paid her to be his wife. To manipulate him. To live in his house. To help fix him like a broken machine. He felt sick. Betrayed. Stupid. Played like a child. The walls closed in. His pulse roared in his ears. The room spun. He stormed out of the study, breath shaking, vision blurring with rage and heartbreak. Nina was in the living room, folding laundry. He slammed the contract on the table. She looked up, confused, then horrified. "Charles, what the hell is this?" he demanded. Nina paled. "Charles, I can explain." "You lied to me," he said, voice breaking. "You were paid to be here. Paid to pretend. Paid to care." "No," she whispered. "Not to care." He laughed bitterly. "Unbelievable. I let you in. I trusted you. Please just listen." "Listen? To what? Another lie?" Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't wipe them. Charles stepped back, hurt radiating from him like fire. "I should have known," he whispered. "I should have known you were too good to be real." He turned. He walked out, and Nina broke. He didn't take anything except his keys and wallet. He got into his sports car, engine roaring like an angry beast, and sped out of the mansion. Nina ran to the driveway, calling his name, but he didn't stop. He didn't even look back. The mansion felt empty the moment he left. Too quiet. Too cold. Nina sank to her knees as the last tears finally fell. She had entered this contract to save her brother. To survive. To help a broken father. She had never meant to fall for the son. And now she had lost him. Inside the mansion, unseen and unheard, a pair of older eyes watched her through a security monitor. Richard Arthur had returned an hour earlier, quietly. And he had witnessed everything. The Arthur mansion felt like a museum, beautiful, polished, and painfully silent. For 3 days now, Nina had walked through its halls feeling like a ghost in a place she never truly belonged. Charles had left, taking the air and warmth with him, and she felt the weight of every empty room pressing against her chest. She stood at the bottom of the grand staircase, suitcase by her side. She couldn't stay any longer, not when every corner reminded her of him. Just as she reached for the handle, the front door opened. Richard Arthur walked in. "Nina," he said, instantly noticing her swollen eyes and packed luggage. She wiped at her face. "Mr. Arthur, I'm leaving. I think it's time." Richard studied her with a knowing, almost heavy look. "You think running away fixes anything?" She swallowed. "Your son hates me. I can't stay here and pretend everything's fine." Richard walked deeper into the living room, gesturing for her to follow. He sank into an armchair, rubbing his forehead. "I have watched that boy burn through money, opportunities, and people. But I have never seen him care about anyone the way he cared about you." Nina's breath shook. "It doesn't matter now. He thinks I manipulated him." "And did you?" Richard asked gently. She lowered her head. "No. But the contract, the way he found out. I can't blame him for being hurt." Richard leaned forward. "Do you know what I saw over these months? Growth." He counted with his fingers. "Responsibility. Patience. Empathy. Maturity." He paused. "And every single one of those changes happened because of you, not the contract." Nina blinked back tears. Richard stood and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "If you leave now, Nina, you're not just giving up on my son. You're giving up on yourself." She shook her head, overwhelmed. "What if he doesn't want to see me?" Richard smiled faintly. "Then he's a bigger fool than I raised him to be. Go to him. Tell him the truth." Nina took a deep breath. Then she nodded. "Okay, I'll go." Charles's Miami penthouse buzzed with nightlife far below, but inside it was quiet, eerily so. He sat alone, untouched drink beside him, eyes fixed on nothing. His reflection in the glass looked unfamiliar, tired, angry, lonely. He replayed that awful moment at the mansion over and over. The contract, the betrayal, the shock, and worst of all, the fear that everything he felt wasn't real. But the more he thought about it, the more painful the truth became. He missed her, more than he ever thought he could miss someone. He tried going out the night before, letting friends drag him to a club. But standing among flashing lights and loud music, he felt strangely detached. The girls who flirted with him sounded like background noise. Nothing had flavor anymore. He left early and came home to silence. For the first time in his life, Charles Arthur wanted more. Not pleasure. Not distractions. Not noise. He wanted substance. He wanted purpose. He wanted Nina. But he didn't know how to forgive a lie until something unexpected happened. He attended a business summit, mostly out of desperation to keep his mind occupied. But while walking through the hotel lobby, he overheard two executives talking about him. Richard Arthur's son? The party boy. The one who's supposed to take over the empire? He's a disaster. Zero discipline. Charles froze. Their words sank like stones in his stomach. This was how the world saw him. Not as a man. Not as an heir. But as a joke. He left the conference early, took the elevator to the parking garage, and sat in his car with his head on the steering wheel. He needed to grow. He needed to change. He needed to be better, not for his father or for public approval. For himself. And for Nina. Late that evening, Charles walked into his penthouse, ready to drown himself in work. He stopped dead in his tracks. Nina was standing near the window, arms wrapped around herself, looking both nervous and determined. His breath caught. "Nina?" She turned, voice soft but steady. "Hi, Charles." He forced calm into his voice. "Why are you here?" She stepped forward. "Because I owe you the whole truth. And because I can't let us end this way." He looked away. "You lied to me." "I know." She swallowed. "And I'll regret that for the rest of my life. But the lie ended long before we became real." He didn't speak. He couldn't. Nina reached into her bag and pulled out the folded contract. "I came to destroy this," she said. She tore it into pieces, slowly, deliberately, letting the scraps fall between them. She took a shaky breath. No contract. No pretending. No act. Then she looked straight into his eyes. "I love you, Charles. I loved you long before I realized it. And nothing, not money, not fear, not a contract, can change that." Charles's chest tightened. He moved toward her slowly, as though afraid she'd disappear. "Say it again," he whispered. "I love you." The dam inside him broke. He pulled her into his arms, holding her with urgency, emotion, desperation. His voice cracked against her ear. "I love you too, Nina." I never stopped. The next morning, they walked into the Arthur mansion hand in hand. Richard waited in the foyer, studying them with unreadable eyes. Charles spoke first. "Dad, I understand now. Everything you feared. Everything you hoped for. And I'm done being the disappointment you worry about." Richard folded his arms. "And Nina?" Charles's grip tightened around her hand. "She's the best thing that has ever happened to me." Richard's stern face finally relaxed into a proud, relieved smile. "Well then," he said, "I suppose the contract served its purpose. But the love, that was all you." Nina felt tears prick her eyes. For the first time, the Arthur family felt whole. 3 months passed. Charles was a different man, focused, responsible, driven, and deeply in love. Nina continued her nursing work, preparing to start her medical specialization. Her brother graduated, finally free of financial worry. Charles had been planning something quietly for weeks. One evening, he drove Nina back to the very hospital where Richard first met her. The hallway was dimly lit, peaceful. He guided her to the staff garden behind the building, decorated with fairy lights and rose petals. Nina stopped, confused. "Charles, what is this?" He turned to her, his eyes warm. "This is where everything began," he said softly. "And I want it to be where our next chapter begins, too." Her breath caught when he dropped to one knee. "Nina Roberts." His voice trembled with emotion. "You weren't part of my father's plan. You weren't part of any plan, but you're everything I never knew I needed." Her eyes filled instantly. "I want to wake up to you. Grow old with you. Make a life with you. Will you marry me?" Nina covered her mouth with both hands, tears flowing freely. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Charles. 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into a kiss that sealed everything their hearts already knew. 2 months later, the Arthur mansion transformed into something magical. Soft lanterns hung from the oak trees. Fresh flowers lined the aisle. A string quartet played gentle melodies. Close friends and loved ones gathered in the lush garden. Nina walked toward Charles in a flowing, elegant ivory gown. Her skin glowed under the sunset, and her smile radiated pure joy. Charles stood at the altar in a tailored navy suit, eyes never leaving her. As she reached him, he whispered, "You look like everything good in this world." The ceremony was intimate and emotional, full of laughter, promises, and grateful tears. When the officiant finally said, "You may now kiss the bride," Charles cupped Nina's face and kissed her with the tenderness of a man who understood he'd been given a miracle. Richard Arthur stood beside them, discreetly wiping tears as he whispered, "Now I can rest. My legacy and my family are safe." Charles and Nina danced slowly under the lights, holding each other close. No lies, no contracts, just love, real, powerful, transformative. And it was only the beginning. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, share, and subscribe to Boundless Echoes for more interesting stories. We really appreciate your support. Comment where you are watching from, so we can give you a shout out. See you in our next video.